Hello and welcome to this International Conference on Men's Issues 2020 interview with your hosts, me, Elizabeth Hobson, leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, and Max Anthony, J4MB's Skilled Design Director. Today's guest is Johan Nayar, who has a master's degree in evolutionary psychology from Brunel University. He's an erudite man with a gift for neat analogies and a creative flair with which he creates films and music. He's also authored a book called The Creativity Manual, designed to help readers flourish creatively. I spoke to Johan last month on the Messages for Men podcast, and I recommend that you check out that very interesting conversation. It'll be a link in the description. Johan, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the ICMI.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, can we dive straight in? And I would like to ask you where you place humans on the sexual dimorphism and monomorphism scale.
So at the extreme end, we have elephant seals. I believe the males are 4 times the size of the females, up to 4 times. And then you have, some species like gibbons and penguins who have the same size. So I think humans are, I can't necessarily say exactly where we are because there are various traits that we can measure it on. I think in height, it's about 15%, if I remember correctly. Weight is about 40%, men are heavier. And the biggest dimorphism is in the tone of voice. So the male voice has a much deeper tone than the female voice.
Interesting.
Do we want to quickly explain for the viewers what those actually mean? The dimorphism versus monomorphism. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, dimorphism is when the two sexes within a species have different traits. They could be physical traits, or they could be psychological or mental traits. So going back to the elephant seals, the males are about 4 times the size, and actually the greater the dimorphism, actually the greater the polygyny, which is actually a term that refers to the number of females that the males will have. So in the elephant seals, I actually ended up, I remember I was actually in California, and I was driving down the road, and I saw a bunch of people stopping, and then when I stopped as well, I saw that it was a beach full of seals, and we decided to just stop for a few minutes and see what was going on. And it was actually a bachelor beach. So with the elephant seals, the alpha males will take over a certain group of females, up to 40, and then they will be challenged by other males who come in, and it's pretty much the biggest ones who keep going. And then when you get down to species that are more similar in size, like gibbons and penguins, they become much more monogamous. So humans, we obviously have the ability to be monogamous, but we also have some predispositions towards polygyny. And this we can see this in the dating market. So in the Middle East, for example, in Islamic countries, you have up to 4 wives for a man, and this is culturally acceptable. But then this also means that you have a lot of males who have none. And then in Western society, this doesn't manifest itself in the same way, because polygamy is in the sense of marriage, is illegal, but you will have a serial monogamy. So the men at the top of the pile will then have multiple serial relationships often, and that's pretty much relating it back to humans again.
Yeah, and you also see it in the dating app data, of course, as well, don't you?
Yes, definitely. I think if you look at some of the data on Tinder, yes, there's a big movement towards the idea of equity, in the sense of everything is equality of opportunity, but actually, women are, I think the top 80% of women will only go for the top 20% of men on dating apps, and the inequality there is very very strong.
Yeah. So are we closer to penguins, or are we closer to elephant seals? What do you think?
I think we're actually, I think I think we're probably closer to the penguins slightly, but then I think each to their own, really, in human society.
I think we can agree that men and women are more the same than different, but there are differences in traits that appear when we look at group level outcomes. And so if we accept, for the sake of argument, that sexism, whether it's targeted at men or women, may play some role, but the data, including the gender equality paradox, seems to suggest that preference and IQ distribution are also significant when we're looking at the outcomes between men and women. So can you talk about this issue of unequal outcomes in more depth?
Sure. So yes, the gender equality paradox, for me, this is as we spoke about on the previous podcast, is connected to as you level the playing field, if you like, for men and women. Actually, if the blank slate model, for example, which is the idea that all differences between men and women are due to society, if this was correct, then you would expect the breaking down of barriers to actually lead to equal numbers of men and women nurses, for example, or even doctors, because women are coming up in fields like as doctors, and then you would expect similar numbers in coding, for example, and computer science. But actually, as you break down these bigger disparities, so more women are actually going towards people-oriented jobs, and more men are going towards thing-oriented jobs. So actually, it's one of the ways in which we see the blank slate model being debunked in real time.
And I mean, I think in terms of the IQ, you can look at the work of is it Murray Strauss?
I'm not sure.
Hang
Charles
on,
Murray?
what is book? No, not Douglas Murray. Give me one.
No,
Charles Murray. Yes, Charles Murray. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah.
I don't know who Murray Strauss is. He sounds nice though. He did the bell curves. Kind of, which showed that men and women on average are about equally intelligent, but that women cluster around the middle and men cluster at either ends. And so, if you look at who has the very lowest IQs, then men are going to be disproportionately represented. And if you look at who has the higher IQs, men are going to be disproportionately represented. But also, I wonder if you've seen any of the work on preference theory by Catherine Hackin.
No, I don't know this one.
Oh, that's really interesting. So she has a paper that came out. I can't remember when it came out. It's a good few years ago now, but
about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was just little. But it's excellent. And what she discovered was that 4 in 7 men are work-centered, with 3 in 7 having other priorities, like, building stable, rewarding relationships and having a healthy work-life balance. Whereas 1 in 7 women are work-centered. So, obviously for the 3 in 7 men and the 1 in 7 women, it's really vitally important that we do break down the barriers so that, there are equal opportunities and they can self-actualize and have a fulfilling life. But, even just from the preferences that people have, we would expect unequal outcomes.
Definitely, yes. So you said it right there. It's equality of opportunity that I believe is the right goal for us to be aiming for. But then you know, when you go for the equality of outcome, which would be 50-50 male and female nurses, or 50-50 male and female computer programmers, then I think you're on the wrong track, because you're not taking into account these preferences. And yes, as you mentioned, the curve is much flatter for men, the IQ curve, and then it's more like you said, clustered around the middle for women. And so, and there is, I would say, a strong evolutionary basis for this, which is that, and this was the analogy I mentioned to you when we first were chatting, which is like it's like a goalkeeper, but instead we apply that as a gene keeper. So due to there's a evolutionary biologist called Robert Trivers, who put forward the theory of parental investment theory, which is the idea that the parent who invests the most in the offspring will be the choosier one. And in humans, this is women who are choosier, and they are choosier when they select men. So as we discussed on the previous podcast, the minimum investment, if you look at it from the hunter-gatherer perspective, would be up to 5 years for a woman and a few minutes for a man. And this is
surprisingly had an impact on our behaviors.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's had a strong impact on our behaviors. And it's meant that if you are, so that the goalkeeper analogy, or the gene keeper analogy, is the idea that women are like a 7 foot tall, super athletic gene keeper who has got incredible reflexes. And if the ball is not in either of the 4 corners, like with it hit with a lot of power, then the striker won't score. So in that case, it'll be the man scoring, or getting the action, if you like. Then whereas males are not so good. So in that sense, the ball doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, it could either be probably hit with a lot of power as long as on target, or it could be nicely placed in the corner without the power. So how does that analogy relate back to human evolution? In that sense, if you're going to have a son, and this is not a conscious choice, this is like your genes at work here. If you're going to have a son, you know, you're going to really aim to smack the ball in the corner. So you're going to have more chance of skying it into row Z, or just completely scuffing the shot. And then you'll also have more chance of really cracking it into the corner and scoring the perfect goal. And that explains the distribution, why you have more men at either peak of either sort of side of the distribution. Whereas if you have a daughter, you're much more likely to have a daughter who then reproduces.
Yeah.
And then the statistics show that we have a 2-to-1 ratio of female ancestors to male ancestors.
Indeed, it's like you know, if you have an average man, he has a kind of, you know, I don't know exactly how much, but say 50-50 chance of reproducing. And so it really pays to take a risk, because if you take the risk, then he's going to have a much better, you know, and you succeed, or your genes succeed in, you know, making that magic formula, then he's going to have a significantly high chance of reproducing, and the capability to reproduce almost infinitely, it would seem. But by taking the risk, you increase the chances that you will miss the goal. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, it's and this actually manifests in risk-taking behavior for men. We know that men are much bigger risk takers because they have much more risk to reward going on. And yeah, if they do hit success, then you know, like Bob Marley or someone can have, you know, that's a literal example of someone who had
literally
biologically yeah, exactly, whose genes then got spread far and wide.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that you said at one point that for every rock star there is an incel? Is that?
Yeah, it's more like it's a vague sort of comparison, but probably more incels in that sense. But yes, it's
yes,
yeah, it's definitely connected to this principle where and this is due to the fact that women have much greater requirements, many more boxes to tick in order to get into even a short-term relationship or a long-term relationship. Although when it's in the context of a long-term relationship, men and women are much more similar, and the things like kindness and intelligence are actually apply to both men and women. But in short-term relationships, women will usually go up in value and will need a significant number of cues to be hit, whereas men will often go down in value as long as it's not as long as it's on the easy side, I guess, of acquiring. Yeah.
And so creativity is one of those cues then.
Yeah.
Because your master's thesis was on this, wasn't it? That, yes.
So creativity, masculine features, social dominance. These are all cues, and in many ways it ties into for the viewers who've watched the previous podcast, it ties into the handicap principle, whereby testosterone is actually it actually reduces your immunity, so it's actually got some very negative impacts on the male body, and so if you have a high testosterone level, you will and you're still fully functioning, then it shows that you've got very good genes for other things as well.
So
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
So you could liken a kind of massively long, like masculine, very impressive beard to that peacock tail that we were talking about.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think so the peacock tail was one of the things that really confused Darwin when he was settling on natural selection as being the primary vehicle for evolution. But then the puzzle for him was sexual selection, and why are there traits that seemingly counterintuitively evolved, which led him to write his second book, The Descent of Man, where he goes into sexual selection in much more detail. And I mean, obviously the man's a genius, but his work covers this in great detail. And now we have later on from that, we have Amos Zahavi, who wrote The Handicap Principle, which shows that traits which are honest signals of, so like the peacock's tail is an honest signal in the sense that it's like a siren on the back of the peacock saying, predators, come and get me. And therefore, if a female does encounter a surviving, dazzling, bright peacock, it's the proof is in the pudding. It's an honest signal of his good agility, good health, and all of these other factors that does fit in with the ideas of natural selection. So she will be selecting then for a son who has those traits. And
so those kind of traits would those be examples of something that that the female in this case would that trait carry more weight because that being an honest signal that you can't fake? Or is that just kind of essentially, I suppose,
one kind of approach, surely?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how important the peacock tail is in comparison to I think when we were talking about the peacocks before, I could almost hear it, that annoying, that noise that peacocks make. I could practically hear it.
That's annoying. That's a wonderful sound.
It gets annoying. it gets. Maybe I've spent too much time around peacocks, but it just made me wonder whether the whether because it's not just the tail, it's a whole load of other things. And I was just wondering if, because you have a much deeper understanding of this, that whether those honest signals are they much more important than the other signals, or is
what is the opposite of an honest signal?
Dishonest one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it has to be honest signals. So so for example, skill on a guitar, for example, having a high level of skill where you do get people moving or people feeling an emotional reaction, you know, if you give that to someone who listens to you play or whatever, then yeah, that is an honest signal. You can't actually fake. I've forgotten the name of the thing where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up when you see something of or hear something of great beauty. But yeah, that for me would be a very honest signal, which, you know, is it's impossible to replicate, and so therefore it's yeah, that will then be a very strong cue for attraction. Which,
yeah, do you want to explain how that kind of creativity, like musical genius, for example, is an honest signal? Obviously, listeners who've heard the previous podcast will have heard us talk about this, but for people who are new to you.
So yeah, I mean, it ties back in with the handicap principle, and I would say it's a it ties in with the, you know, the wastefulness. So if you can manage to put yourself together, applying it to the modern world, if you can put yourself together, hold down a normal job, and then still have the extra energy to create brilliant work, then I would say that is a
demonstration.
It can't be faked. And I mean, I think honest signals are also people who speak the truth in this age. You know, there's the sort of the joke about being stunning and brave, you know, and things that are completely not stunning and not brave, you know, like bringing up your child gender neutral, for example. That's not stunning or brave. It's a bit crazy for me, but it's, whereas, yeah, actually fighting these narratives that are so strong in the media and coming from academia, that is actually that's an honest signal for me. And it's again, it's hard to fake, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, there is another approach, isn't there? And so I'm thinking of cuttlefish.
Right, yeah.
There are male cuttlefish. So like male cuttlefish, really big, collect the smaller females underneath their shells, have sex with them when they feel like. But there are some males who mimic the sort of proportions and look like female cuttlefish. And because of this, the big guys welcome them under the shell, and then they go and sneakily have sex with all of the wives. So is that a dishonest signal? And
I think the biological name for that is the sneaky fuckers. Literally, it literally is. But yeah, I would say that it's an honest signal in the sense of I wouldn't say it's necessarily. It would depend on how much female choice there was in that species. So in that sense, I wouldn't necessarily say, maybe it's an honest signal in the sense of it's a good replication, but a lot of academics like Gad Saad will relate this back to male feminists and what they're getting up to. But yeah, I think it's a not necessarily fits into the honest signal.
No, I was suggesting it was a dishonest signal.
Oh, no, I mean, it kind of, if it works, then it works, you know. I think, yeah, in that species, it seems to work. So, but yes, I think in terms of dishonest signals, relating it back to humans, yes, it's. I think if you're just completely parroting, you know, what CNN are telling you or whatever, then yeah, that's like, are you really thinking for yourself, you know, or yeah.
So creativity and a good sense of humor would be honest signals then. I think that is one of the
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, this is the thing about a good sense of humor. You can't actually, you know, it's kind of hard to fake a laugh, you know, and it's so comedians, you know, that is a really raw form of art, because you're just out there, and you're like, the only measure of how good you are is how many laughs you're getting back, and you could really bomb on the stage. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, some people I've heard like woke comedians saying that laughter is no longer a prerequisite of comedy. So it's yeah, it's getting quite funny out there. Yeah.
Oh, that's the best joke they've told in years.
That is a good joke.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can kind of grasp how men signal and how, what the cues that women are looking for. Do women signal to men in the same way?
So yeah, because we have a two-way, it's like it goes in both directions. So as I said, women are choosier than men, but unlike the peacock, where as we discussed in the previous podcast, they gather into leks, which is a group of peacocks, and the females will wait for the male to become available, and the male won't say, "Oh no, not you." he's gonna everyone in his queue, he will do the business. So whereas human males, because especially regarding the long-term relationships, males have a strong degree of selection as well. So due to that, the females evolved sexual traits that men like, and these are often tied in with fertility and availability. So if a woman is already pregnant, then that's not going to be a good option for a man. So waist to hip ratio is a symbol of youth and not being pregnant. And then there's actually a number, which is 0.7, which is the optimal across, as we know, in different cultures. Some people like thicker women, some people like slimmer women, but that number actually stays quite consistent across cultures. Yeah.
And that would be one of those traits that is quite difficult to fake. Certain other traits can be embellished and certain products called concealer, right? But
yes, exactly. I mean, yes, it's the corset. We're going back to the corset, which is it's a sort of way of what's that?
I didn't think of that. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's okay. That's okay. Yeah,
I was completely off there, wasn't I? Yeah.
But I mean, it's still difficult, because you can't just to just completely flip this on his head. There's a very funny moment in Deborah So's book, The End of Gender, where she relates the sort of the body positivity movement in feminism to a way of denigrating your rivals. So her idea is that is a sneaky way of some women actually making it more difficult for their rivals to find a mate by letting them get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it's it's a sneaky tactic which seems to be tied in with feminism. Yeah,
that's a whole other sneaky fucker thing, isn't it?
That is that is definitely
And I wonder, could you thinking about the peacock and how active the most successful peacock will be during mating season, you told me a really good story about chickens. Do you remember that one?
I know, which one was that again?
Oh, who was it? So it was a man. I can't remember who he was.
Is it the Coolidge effect?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think I told you that, but yeah, that's a very funny story, which I can definitely tell you about. It was President Coolidge. I forget his first name, but him and his wife were being shown around a farm, and the wife they were shown around for whatever reason. They were shown around separately, and when they got to the chicken coop, the rooster was hard at work doing his business with a female hen, and Mrs. Coolidge said, how many times a day must he perform his duty? And he said, 5 or 6. And she said, oh, be sure to tell that to Mr. Coolidge. So Mr. Coolidge was being shown around, and as the story goes, the rooster was hard at work, and the farmer said, "Oh, Mrs. Coolidge said, I should tell you that he has to perform his duty 5 times a day." And he said, he asked, "Is it with the same female every time?" And the farmer said, "No, a different one every time." He said, "Be sure to tell that to Mrs. Coolidge."
Excellent. Well, I think that's been another very informative and interesting conversation. Have you got any points to add?
No, just in the sense of, yeah, I think there's always the possibility. I believe there are 2 types of creativity. There's big C creativity, which is like a Dostoevsky or a Jimi Hendrix or someone like that. And then there's a small C creativity, which is on an everyday level. And I think, I mean, I think for men and women, but as we're talking to men here, you know, as guys, you know, it's a good idea to try and tap into that. And this can definitely help to build up your better relationships. There's a book called Impro by Keith Johnstone, which is one of my favorite books, and he goes into how to improvise in a comedic way. And so yeah, it's if you're a big C creative, that's amazing. But always be looking to develop your small C creativity as well, which will definitely serve you in relationships, in business, in life in general.
Absolutely. That does make me wonder, actually. Would it be the case? I'm imagining it would, that, you know, I mean, I think it's quite clear that big C creativity is much more common in men, although very rare, you know, and less common but still identifiable in women. But in terms of small C creativity, you know, is there a gender difference in that? Because I'm kind of thinking of, like, you know, a lot of women enjoy their crafts and their hobbies and, you know, making their house very pleasant in a way that's not quite as common, I would imagine, in men. Or am I wrong there? Am I just being
I would say, yeah, we go into this in much better detail in the previous podcast, where we look into the Scheherazade strategy and the idea that creativity evolved seemingly for women in the sense of keeping a man, whereas for men it's much more about the risk taking. And yeah, I mean, it's such a steep exponential curve where to get to the very top of any creative field, that the risk takers will more likely be men, and it's not the risk to reward is not so. It's the same with things like becoming a CEO. You know, the ratios of men to women are much higher, but that doesn't mean that if you have the predisposition for it, you know, if you do, then you're an individual, you've got to go for it. And but yes, I would say we definitely have slightly different ways of showing that. And yeah, the homemaking seems to be a strong trait amongst women. And funnily enough, with sense of humor, and actually with verbal repertoire, females do prefer men who have a good sense of humor. And so it's like when in the dating world, when a man and a woman, GSOH is a very common acronym, which was on the Lonely Hearts ads.
Yes, that's
but
right.
in the sense of men, it was men. Instead of women, it was women looking for men who had a good sense of humor. Yeah. In terms of men, it was women who appreciated a good sense of humor. And it's the same with like the repertoire of words. And this actually brings us back into the birds, which is, instead of the peacock, we're looking into songbirds, where males with a greater repertoire of I forget the exact songbird, but yes, it's the males with the greater repertoire of songs will then attract more females as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Elizabeth.
I was just going to say, whereas a female with a good repertoire will not be significantly advantaged?
In the sense of getting a man, but in the sense of keeping a man, yeah, if we go back into the Scheherazade strategy, which I don't know if we have time for now, but yes, it's
I think
there'll be a link. There'll be a link to the previous podcast in the description. So yeah.
Great, yeah. So in that sense, in terms of keeping a man, because of the variety seeking, which is innate in men, there's more pressure on women to almost reinvent themselves creatively, to change their hair, to change their nails, to change their clothes. And so, you know, I don't know what the ratio is, but it's
so that's our fault too.
that part is men's fault, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just two different strategies. Men look for status in themselves in order to impress women, and women look for beauty and variety in their hair and in things in order to interest men. So it's like this is sexual dimorphism and how there are innate sex differences in men and women.
Fascinating.
Which I'm almost tempted to try and suggest that we try and play down, because otherwise people are going to literally, like I said, you know, it's like, that's another thing that it's men's fault. It's like, right.
Yeah, I went to I was at a feminist conference, I think it was 2016, Philia in London, and I was I'd been like a kind of silent observer for the whole day, and then I got to the final talk, and it was on women and the environment, and you know, the thrust of the conversation went, men are raping and pillaging the planet and they're just awful, and if we were in charge, then the planet would be absolutely, you know, healthy and wonderful. And so I was like, I just can't sit on my hands anymore. So I stuck my hand up and I said, you know, is it not relevant that the vast majority of consumer spending is done by women? And you know, one of the panelists said, oh, you know, well done, that was a really brave question to ask. And then she explained to me that the reason women are so obsessed with buying clothes and shoes and all of this is because men in advertising tell them they need them.
Oh my God. No, I mean it's
actually it's Mother Nature.
Yeah, I mean there are huge benefits in a relationship when for the children if the parents are together. And so yeah, I guess it's, you know, women are serving themselves by creating, you know, this variety in hairstyles and makeup and different looks, because it yeah, I mean there's nothing wrong with it. It's a very sort of biological drive, which not necessarily saying that all things that are natural are good, but it's I think it's one of the things that helps us grow as a species is yeah, I mean men also have status thing, and then that is, you know, that is a really tough game. You know, that's a tough game to get into, because...
and that's a whole other kind of you know, podcast in and of itself, isn't it? But
pretty much, yeah.
I think that it would be great to speak to you again and cover those kind of subjects in more detail, really.
Definitely. Absolutely. Sounds good. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll leave links to your social media profiles and some other videos. Definitely our old podcast, which was longer and more in depth and very interesting. So I encourage everybody to watch that too. But yes, thanks again.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Max. It's been great.
Thank you.
See ya.